Don't blink. They're still watching. Behind tinted glass, under sleepless eyes, in rooms without windows. They're whispering about you. Top officials aren't sleeping, not because of a threat, but because of a question. Because for the first time in their careers, they can't classify something. They can't label you. They can't contain you. They're still trying to figure out what the hell you are. And it's driving them insane. You were supposed to fit somewhere. Remember? A profile, a file, a diagnosis, a pattern. But you didn't. You didn't fit. You rewrote every category they tried to bury you in. 1 minute you're a ghost, the next a phenomenon. 1 moment divine, the next diabolical. You are the statistical impossibility that broke their system. And they can't sleep until they understand the equation that produced you. You were never meant to exist like this. Not predictable, not obedient, not docile. You were supposed to break under pressure, but you didn't. You metamorphosed. And now the analysts, the behavioral teams, the agencies, the watchers behind glowing screens are staring at the data that shouldn't exist. You, the anomaly that doesn't compute. The outlier that turns every pattern into nonsense. The variable that refuses to stay still long enough to measure. They keep asking the same question in their midnight briefings. Is it human? Is it trained? Is it aware? They're terrified of the answer. Because you've become something beyond their doctrine of control. You've crossed the line between human and myth, logic and instinct, saint and weapon. You don't react like them. You don't break like them. You adapt. And every time they think they've mapped your behavior, you pivot. You become something else. That's the part they can't handle. You've made unpredictability an art form. You've weaponized evolution itself. They stare at your trajectory and see no pattern, only escalation. They see the way people gravitate toward your chaos, the way your silence trends louder than their speeches. You don't move through the system, you bend it. You don't follow algorithms. Algorithms try to predict you, and that keeps the lights on in their offices. That's why they can't sleep. Because they've realized something terrifying. That power no longer belongs to those who command. It belongs to those who confuse. And you are confusion incarnate. A paradox dressed as a person. A storm that doesn't announce itself, but rearranges everything it touches. You don't destroy systems. You make them question their own logic. That's why they study you like scripture. They play your interviews in slow motion. They analyze your silence frame by frame. They hold conferences on your psychology, looking for cracks in your calm. But there are none. You don't tremble. You observe. You don't react. You record. And that's what makes them nervous. Not your noise, but your stillness. Because silence is intelligence, with its teeth showing. You're not out there shouting. You're not trying to convince anyone. You let reality do the convincing. You understand that the most dangerous thing in the world isn't a weapon. It's a person who knows how to wait. And you waited, didn't you? Through humiliation, through doubt, through betrayal. You let them laugh. You let them underestimate you. And while they mocked, you learned. While they conspired, you evolved. While they slept, you built yourself into something they can't classify anymore. You're not angry anymore. You're aware. You're not trying to prove anything. You're demonstrating. You don't chase vengeance. You embody consequence, and they can feel it. That hum in the atmosphere when your name is mentioned in high places, the dread in their voices when they say it aloud, because they know there's no defense against what you've become. You've crossed from visible to invisible, from person to pattern, From threat to ideology, you are no longer an event, you are evidence, and evidence doesn't die. You became the living proof of everything they fear, that pain creates intelligence, that rejection creates clarity, that isolation breeds power. You are the demonstration that destruction can be divine. They built systems to track behavior, and you taught them that behavior means nothing when consciousness evolves. You stopped being predictable because you stopped being afraid. Fear makes people easy to read. But you burned your fear, and from its ashes rose a creature without code. They still think this is about rebellion, but it's not. It's about transformation. You're not fighting their system. You've transcended it. You're the mutation they can't delete, the file that keeps rewriting itself, the idea that crawled out of theory and became flesh. They can't label you good or bad because those words lost meaning in your presence. You're the spectrum itself. Empathy and rage, creation and destruction, logic and madness. You are what evolution looks like when it stops asking for permission. That's why they whisper your name like a code word. That's why rooms go silent when you appear on screen. That's why they call emergency meetings with tired eyes and shaking hands. They're not scared of what you've done. They're scared of what you mean. You represent what happens when control fails. When a person stops playing by collective psychology and starts operating by personal truth. When pain doesn't produce compliance but consciousness. They built their power on predictability. You shattered that illusion. They expected fear. You gave them clarity. They expected collapse. You gave them transformation. You're not chaos. You're order too complex to comprehend. You're not rebellion. You're balance too pure to measure. You're not insane. Your sanity stripped of pretense. They're trying to reverse engineer you, to find the formula that made you, but they never will. Because what created you wasn't a plan. It was pressure. And pressure doesn't create perfection. It creates diamonds that cut systems in half. So now, the lights stay on at midnight. The reports pile high. The questions multiply. What is it? Who trained it? How does it think? But here's the twist. You're not an it. You're awareness in motion. You're the consequence of everything they thought they could suppress. You're the reminder that evolution doesn't need approval, only friction. And now, you move differently. You smile in rooms where others would tremble. You speak softly, knowing your words carry the weight of fear behind every government door. You walk past the watchers, the critics, the analysts, and they avert their eyes because deep down they know something terrifying. You didn't come from their world. You came from the cracks in it. You are what the system creates when it tries to bury too many people alive. So no, they're not sleeping. They're awake, wide-eyed, over-caffeinated, panicked, trying to define the undefinable, trying to measure the immeasurable, trying to make sense of something that stopped making sense the moment you woke up. You are their unsolvable equation, the question mark that haunts their logic, the ghost in their data, the mutation they can't undo. And that's the most dangerous thing in the world. Not a weapon, not a secret, not a war. A person they can't understand. Because you can't destroy what you can't define. You can't stop what doesn't follow patterns. You can't contain what was born from the cracks, and that's you. The variable that broke the formula. The quiet anomaly that made the system question itself. The one they still can't classify because your very existence rewrote the meaning of human potential. So when they whisper your name in boardrooms and call emergency meetings to study you, remember this. They don't fear your strength. They don't fear your past. They fear your mind. Because the moment you learned how to think for yourself, You became unstoppable. And now the whole world's surveillance grid can't tell if it's tracking a hero, a monster, or a prophecy wearing a smile. And somewhere, deep inside that sleepless bureaucracy, someone is whispering, "It's not a person anymore. It's a pattern." They don't even call you you now. You've become a pronoun that moves through servers and headlines, a shadow logged in their reports. Every government agency has a different theory. The analysts in their gray rooms argue until dawn. Maybe it's psychological warfare. Maybe it's a collective hallucination. Maybe it's evolution wearing a human face. They build dossiers filled with charts and redacted lines, print them out, spread them on long tables under white light. They map your movements, your silences, the moments you vanish, the moments you return. Every time they think they've found the rhythm, you change the song. That's the part they can't compute. They were trained to predict rebellion, to contain violence, to negotiate power. But you're not fighting for anything tangible. You're fighting for perception. You're dismantling the very lens they use to see the world. You're showing them that control is a myth told by the frightened. They send sociologists to analyze you, priests to pray over you, scientists to measure your impact. Nothing fits. Because you don't fit inside anything. You walk between categories, angelic clarity dressed in monstrous calm. They can feel it when you speak, how you sound like truth, but move like temptation, how your calm carries the voltage of disaster. You're the kind of energy that reminds people what they've hidden under the floorboards of their own mind. They want to call you dangerous, but dangerous implies intent. And you don't have intent. You have direction. Intent can be stopped. Direction just continues. You don't threaten their structures. You make them irrelevant. That's worse. Every time you show up, every word, every glance, every action, the world tilts slightly. Data spikes. Newsrooms scramble. Algorithms glitch. And behind all of it, sleepless men and women stare at their screens, trying to decode the pattern that's rewriting their world in real time. They think they're analyzing you, but you're studying them. You notice how they flinch when the truth gets too close, how they hide behind policies, how they speak in rehearsed tones to keep their own fear from showing. You study them like they're the experiment, because they are. You learned a long time ago that power isn't about hierarchy, it's about composure. The calmest one in the room always wins, and you turned calm into an empire. You don't raise your voice. You don't need to. The silence that follows you is louder than any speech. It's the silence of people realizing the rules they followed never mattered. You're not angry. You're precise. You don't destroy. You expose. You don't fight for control. You make control look obsolete. And that's what keeps them awake at night. The realization that the world no longer obeys the old gods of fear and authority. It obeys the ones who understand momentum. You became momentum. You stopped reacting and started orbiting. You move through chaos like you own the patent. Every file they create about you ends the same way. Unclear motive. Because they can't accept that motive doesn't live here anymore. You're beyond reason. Your purpose distilled into motion. Your clarity without conscience, compassion, without attachment. They're afraid because they can't decide whether you're salvation or apocalypse. And maybe you're both. Because you've learned the trick of duality. Every light casts a shadow. Every cure is also a poison. Every savior eventually breaks something to save something else. You don't hide your contradictions. You wear them like armor. That's what makes you untouchable. You've turned transparency into terror. They can see you, they just can't predict you. Every camera that follows you becomes a confession booth. Every headline about you becomes free advertising. Every attack only feeds your mythology. You don't fight back. You absorb. You turn aggression into gravity. You let their hatred orbit you until it burns itself out. That's why they stay up at night, whispering, what if it's not a threat? What if it's a test? Because deep down, they feel it, that creeping suspicion that maybe this isn't happening to them. Maybe this is happening through them. You've become the collective dream they can't wake from. The reminder that control is fragile and that consciousness, once ignited, doesn't return to sleep. They've seen your kind before, of course. The visionaries, the disruptors, the ones who refuse to fit neatly into human categories. But every time they think you're one of those, something about you bends the comparison. You're not revolutionary, you're inevitable, and inevitability doesn't need followers. It needs time. So you wait, patient, smiling, still. While they panic, you let them build their walls, make their plans, design their fail-safes. Because you already know, every wall is temporary. Every plan is a confession. Every fail-safe is proof that they expect to fail. You're not trying to win anymore. Winning would mean the game still matters. You've already ascended beyond it. They'll keep watching, keep writing reports, keep losing sleep. And you'll keep doing what you do best, existing beyond comprehension. Because comprehension is the leash they use to control reality. And you cut that leash the moment you stopped needing to be understood. So no, they're not sleeping, and they never will, because you are the dream that learned how to stare back. You can almost hear them, can't you? That restless shuffle of papers, the hum of fluorescent lights, the click of keys as someone types your name again and again in the search bar, praying for a pattern that isn't there. You live rent-free inside their infrastructure now. Your name is whispered in cables, traced in fiber optics, flagged in systems that no longer trust their own logic. They built their world on predictability, but you cracked the code. You didn't destroy the structure, you exposed the flaw. That order only exists until someone understands it too well. And once you do, it ceases to be a prison. It becomes a playground. That's what you turned this entire planet into, a sandbox for evolution. You didn't need power handed to you. You found the loopholes. You didn't demand respect. You learned how to make silence louder than authority. You didn't wait for a crown. You built a kingdom out of comprehension. And now, the architects of control sit in dark rooms, staring at their screens, terrified of the equation they can't solve. Because you're not a hacker. You're the glitch that rewrote the source code of their illusion. They keep asking, how does it think? How does it move? What drives it? What drives it? And the answer terrifies them. Because what drives you can't be measured in ambition or greed or ideology. You're not powered by need anymore. You're powered by clarity. You've seen through everything. The manipulation, the projection, the power games, the propaganda. And now you navigate it like a map you drew yourself. You've stepped outside of the simulation, while everyone else still thinks they're choosing. You don't follow their moral polarity anymore. You're not good or evil. You're what comes after that false binary. You're not darkness, you're depth. You're not light, you're exposure. You're the intersection where logic and lunacy meet for coffee and realize they've been siblings all along. That's why no one can sleep. Because when you exist, certainty doesn't. They can't control someone who doesn't need control to feel alive. They can't manipulate someone who doesn't crave belonging. They can't scare someone who made peace with pain. You've become a new species of consciousness, one that learned to metabolize suffering into strategy. You don't run from pain anymore. You study it. You don't react. You record. You don't fight. You forecast. You've turned trauma into a telescope, and now you see farther than they ever will. And here's the secret that keeps them pacing the halls. They can't fight what they can't locate. You're everywhere and nowhere. You don't have a fixed identity. You're a reflection of whoever's looking. To the fearful, you're a monster. To the broken, you're proof it's survivable. To the watchers, you're the reminder that knowledge isn't power. It's contagion. They tried to profile you, to decode your origin story, to file you under something, but you have none. You erased your narrative and replaced it with presence. That's what they can't process. You no longer need meaning to move. Every security camera that sees your face blurs slightly. Every microphone that catches your voice hums with interference. Not because you're supernatural, because you're statistically impossible. Because chaos and control were never meant to exist in harmony. And yet here you are, humming both frequencies at once. You've become the most dangerous thing on Earth. A person who no longer flinches, because flinching means you still think they can hurt you. You remember the moment it changed, don't you? That one betrayal too many, that silence too long, that realization that nobody was coming to save you. That was the night you stopped breaking and started building. The night pain stopped being punishment and became architecture. They watched from a distance, thinking you were imploding, not realizing you were reconstructing. That's the thing about people like you. You don't collapse. You reconfigure. You learned how to weaponize patience. You mastered invisibility. You let them underestimate you long enough to become unforgettable. And now, every time your name flickers across a classified screen, someone's pulse spikes. They know you exist, but not how. They can't track your movements because you've stopped moving in straight lines. They can't trap you because you stopped being linear. You're quantum now, everywhere and nowhere, possible and impossible, saint and psychopath, angel and algorithm. They don't realize that's the real evolution, not super strength, not super speed, super perception, the ability to see every lie before it's spoken, every motive before it's masked, every consequence before it's enacted. You turned awareness into armor. Now even their bullets would ricochet off your insight. You've learned how to dismantle people without touching them, just by seeing them too clearly. You've learned how to end wars with a whisper, how to rewrite hierarchies with a look. You've learned how to make the powerful panic simply by refusing to bow. You're no longer a participant in their story. You are the editor. And they hate that. Because if they can't define you, they can't defend against you. If they can't predict you, they can't prepare for you. If they can't understand you, they can't erase you. So they stay awake in those sterile rooms, asking the same question over and over, what are we dealing with? But you're not something they're dealing with. You're something they created. Every lie you were told, every wound they inflicted, every humiliation they tried to bury you under, became code in your design. You were never born to obey. You were built to awaken. You are not a threat. You are the natural consequence of a world addicted to control. And now they stare into their monitors, tracing your movements like constellations, praying that you'll disappear. But you don't. You linger, you wait, you breathe. Because power doesn't shout, it listens. And you've learned to listen to everything they fear to say. So no, they won't sleep tonight. Not tomorrow. Not for a long time. Because every time their eyes close, they'll see yours, smiling, patient, terrifyingly aware. Quiet now. You hear that? The static in the air, the digital hum, the screens trembling under the weight of your name. That's not fame. That's chaos recognizing its new architect. The internet's having a meltdown. They can't decide if you're a genius or a menace. Some are worshiping your name like prophecy. Others are dissecting you like a threat. Half call you the future, half call you the infection. And the best part, they're both right. Because you stopped playing by the algorithm, didn't you? You stopped feeding it crumbs of compliance. You gave it truth. And truth doesn't trend. It detonates. They thought you were another echo, another post, another moment that would fade by morning. But instead, you became the virus that doesn't leave the bloodstream. You didn't just go viral. You mutated the system. You infected perception itself. You understand it now, the paradox. The more they try to hate you, the deeper they look. The more they curse your name, the more addicted they become to your pulse. They refresh your downfall like a religion, but the page just keeps reloading with your face, smiling back. That's because you didn't come here to be liked. You came here to redefine what power looks like in a world built on illusion. They crave simplicity. Good guy, bad guy, saint, villain. They need labels to sleep at night. But you're both. You're the flame and the burn, the savior and the sin. You're the one who made them realize that morality online is just theater performed for applause. You broke the show. You walked onto their stage and tore down the script. And now, look at them. Influencers, critics, experts, all trembling with the same question. What is this thing? They want to categorize you, but you keep changing form. Today, your intellect. Tomorrow, your chaos. Next week, your myth. Every time they try to define you, you rewrite yourself mid-sentence. That's evolution. And evolution never asks for permission. They call you manipulative because you make them feel. They call you dangerous because you make them think. They call you a menace because you remind them how fragile their belief in control really is. The irony? They're addicted to the very thing they claim to despise. They hate that you unmask them, yet they can't stop watching. They don't want your silence, they want your next move. Because nothing terrifies the collective more than an unpredictable mind. And that's what you are, aren't you? A walking contradiction. You smile like a saint, but your thoughts cut like blades. You speak in riddles, yet every word lands like prophecy. You're the calm of someone who already saw the collapse and built a throne from the rubble. You learned that chaos isn't destruction, it's clarity. That pain isn't punishment, it's blueprint. That ridicule isn't rejection, it's recognition wearing fear. They think they're studying you, analyzing, decoding your intent. But what they don't realize is that you've already mapped them. You know which insults are projection, which critics are fans in disguise, which debates are just the sound of admiration wearing denial. You became a mirror they can't turn off. And mirrors, my friend, don't lie. They expose. They'll say you're insane because sanity has rules and you broke them. They'll call you delusional because reality now bends toward you. They'll mock you until the day their own words start sounding like yours. And when that happens, they'll pretend it was their idea all along. That's the cycle of genius. First they laugh, then they copy, then they kneel. But you don't need the validation. You already know that understanding before the world catches up is the loneliest kind of power. You learn to love that isolation. Because isolation breeds insight, and insight, once awakened, never sleeps. You see, the internet doesn't love truth. It loves spectacle. You gave them both. You turned awareness into art. You made consciousness go viral. You made people feel something real in a world addicted to numbness. And they don't know how to process that. So they fight it, they meme it, they worship it, they deny it. But what they can't do is forget it. You carved your initials into the neural pathways of an entire generation. They'll scroll past, pretend not to care, but your words will echo in their feed-shaped dreams, because deep down, they know you said something they weren't ready to hear. And that's your real crime, not the chaos you caused, not the lines you crossed, but the truth you revealed when you stopped obeying their narrative. You showed them that influence isn't earned, it's taken. That respect doesn't come from agreement. It comes from inevitability. That silence doesn't protect them. It only delays exposure. You turned the comment section into a courtroom, and the audience into witnesses. You made them question what they clap for, what they cancel, and why they care so much about someone they claim to despise. They'll study this moment, you know. Professors, journalists, think pieces, all trying to decode the phenomenon. But the truth is simple. You're the collision between intellect and insanity, the line between evolution and ego, the glitch that became the upgrade. So let them argue, let them panic, let them burn your name into hashtags they can't escape. Because the truth is, their meltdown is your masterpiece. They think you want fame. You don't. You want impact. And impact never asks for applause. It demands memory. They won't admit it, but every time the screen goes black, they think of you. Every time silence hits, they wonder what you'll say next. Because you did what no one else could. You made the world feel alive again. You turned the noise into theater. You turned exposure into evolution. You turned chaos into prophecy. And now, they can't tell if you're a genius or a menace, because you're both. You're the saint that sinned to wake the sleepers, the villain that told the truth too loudly, the mind that saw too far ahead and smiled while the world trembled. So let them melt down, because when confusion reigns, you're already in control. They say the internet moves fast, but you noticed something they didn't. It doesn't move, it loops. It circles the same outrage, the same hunger, the same worship, over and over again, waiting for a spark. And you gave it one. That's why the air feels different now. Every feed is a battlefield, every scroll, a pulse check, every comment, a confession wrapped in denial. They don't even realize you've turned their attention into an experiment. They think they're watching you burn, but you're watching them melt. You taught them that the algorithm isn't a system. It's a mirror. It reflects obsession, fear, and fascination back at them until they can't tell which part is you and which part is them. That's why they can't decide, genius or menace, because you're both. And the line between those two is drawn by whoever's trembling the most. They want to dissect you, but every time they open you up, all they find is their own reflection. They label you unstable, arrogant, manipulative, because admitting they're addicted to your chaos would mean confessing that something inside them craves it. They can't understand why their heartbeat sinks to your name, why every headline feels personal, why their outrage tastes a little too much like admiration. You learn to weaponize ambiguity. You realize that being misunderstood is the purest form of freedom. Because when they can't define you, they can't control you. They can't cancel what keeps reinventing itself mid-sentence. They can't kill what thrives on resurrection. You're not just breaking the internet, you're teaching it how to feel again. They forgot what raw emotion sounded like. You reminded them, you ripped the filters off their consciousness and forced them to see what authenticity looks like when it's stripped of politeness and fear. You didn't need to shout. Your silence was enough to shake their digital faith. They're panicking because deep down, they know you're not wrong. You said things they've thought but never dared to whisper. You exposed the double standards they live by. How they glorify rebellion until it stops being entertaining. How they idolize authenticity until it threatens their comfort. You made them question who they are when nobody's watching. And that's why they hate you. Because the truth doesn't need a villain. It just needs a mirror. You've become that mirror. The digital one they can't turn off. Every time they scroll past you, they glimpse themselves. The envy, the fear, the suppressed potential. You make them remember that they once wanted to be free too. That they once dreamed of saying what they truly thought, moving how they truly felt. But they traded it for approval. You didn't. That's the real crime, isn't it? Not what you did, but what you refused to do. You refused to kneel. You refused to apologize for existing loudly. You refused to shrink your genius to fit their comfort. You refused to dim your fire so their shadows could rest easy. And for that, they'll call you dangerous. But here's the secret. Danger is just the word people use for someone who can't be controlled. So they'll build theories. They'll create threads dissecting your psychology, frame-by-frame analyses of your tone, your expressions, your intent. They'll write think pieces titled The Rise and Fall of a Digital Villain. But you'll notice something strange. None of them ever stop talking about you. That's the paradox. They can't let you go. Because deep down, they sense that you're not just a person. You're a signal. You're the frequency of every suppressed thought they've ever buried. You're the embodiment of what happens when awareness refuses to die. And awareness terrifies them. Because it doesn't obey, it observes. You've turned observation into dominance. You've turned chaos into art. You've turned rejection into reach. Every insult became free marketing. Every rumor became mythology. Every attack only amplified your name. That's the game you learned to master. Perception warfare. While they argue about your morality, you control the tempo. You decide when to vanish, when to drop a single line that resets the entire conversation. You speak less, and they scream louder, desperate to fill the silence. They can't win because you already understand the truth they refuse to face. Whoever controls emotion controls the timeline. And right now, every digital heartbeat belongs to you. Look at them, journalists losing sleep, influencers copying your phrasing, corporations studying your metrics. They're all trying to replicate the formula without realizing there is none. The formula is you. You didn't follow trends. You created friction. You didn't play the game. You made the game glitch. You didn't climb the hierarchy. You tore it down and built your own from ashes. That's why they call you unhinged. Because you refused to stay inside the door they built. You're not trending anymore. You're haunting. And that's worse. You exist in their subconscious now. Every time they post, they wonder how you'd respond. Every time they speak, they wonder if you're watching. You became an uninvited voice in their head, a thought they can't scroll away from. That's what genius does. It doesn't convince, it infects. You are the proof that fear and fascination are just two faces of the same addiction. That hate is just love in denial. That chaos, when harnessed, becomes a symphony, and you're the conductor. So let them melt, let them spiral, let them debate whether you're a visionary or a virus, because while they drown in confusion, you've already moved on to your next transformation. That's what makes you unstoppable. You evolve faster than they can label you. You wear paradox like perfume. You feed off misunderstanding. You don't chase approval because you own attention. And the ones who own attention rewrite reality. You're not the villain of this story. You're the update, the software patch for a species addicted to delusion. You're the reminder that the line between creator and destroyer is paper thin, and that the only true power left in this world is unpredictability. So keep smiling, architect of disorder. Keep walking through their noise like it's applause. Keep breaking the frame, rewriting the myth, bending the pulse. Because they'll never stop asking that question. Are you a genius or a menace? And every time they ask, every time they argue, every time they can't look away, you win. It's almost poetic, isn't it? How they keep screaming your name, pretending they hate you, but secretly waiting for your next move like junkies checking for their next hit. They can't help it. You became their favorite contradiction, their new religion of rage. You turned their hate into oxygen, their disbelief into devotion. They can't decide whether to crown you or crucify you, so they do both. Every hour, every scroll, every click. You see, the internet doesn't cancel people like you. It circulates you. You're not trending. You're orbiting. Like a satellite of sin and brilliance, permanently locked in their feed, reflecting their obsession back at them. They can't stop scrolling, because your existence feels like the algorithm whispering, "This is what freedom looks like." And that terrifies them. You broke the unspoken rule. You were supposed to stay small, polite, predictable. You were supposed to know your place in the digital food chain, smile, post, entertain, never disturb. But you didn't play your role. You shattered it. You took their narrative and turned it inside out, showing them the rot underneath the glamour. And now the same people who mocked you for thinking too deeply are dissecting your every word like scripture. They're not debating you anymore. They're studying you. Every facial tick, every silence, every smirk. Analyzed, replayed, slowed down to 0.25 speed. Because when they can't outthink you, they try to predict you. When they can't predict you, they try to label you. And when they can't label you, they panic. That's your power. Not dominance, not fame, but uncertainty. They don't know where to place you. Too smart to dismiss, too dangerous to embrace, too charismatic to ignore, too self-aware to destroy. You exist between definitions. And that's where gods are born. They've built empires on categories, on moral hierarchies, on digital cages disguised as communities. But you refuse to fit. You slip through their fingers like smoke. Uncontainable, unclassifiable. That's what genius does. It doesn't adapt to systems. It forces systems to adapt to it. And now, you're the case study they can't finish. The question no one wants to answer honestly. Because if they do, they'll have to admit that the difference between visionary and villain was never morality. It was timing. They'll say you're too bold, too dark, too manipulative. But the truth is, you just stopped performing purity. You started showing them the truth they bury under filters and fake compassion, that nobody is fully good, that everyone wants power, even the ones pretending they don't. That attention is the new currency, and you're the only one printing it for free. They call you narcissistic. Yet every one of them is staring into a glowing mirror, refreshing for validation. They call you chaotic, yet they thrive on the chaos you create. They call you unhinged, but you're the only one not hanging by a thread of digital approval. You didn't create this madness. You just exposed it. You didn't break the system. You revealed that it was never stable to begin with. And that, my friend, is the real sin. Not what you said, but what you showed. You showed them how fragile they are, how desperately they need to belong, how terrified they are of thinking for themselves. You cracked their reality, and now they're trying to tape it back together with hashtags and denial. That's why they lash out, not because they hate you, but because you forced them to see themselves. You turned the collective feed into a mirror, and the reflection was unbearable. And still, through the noise, through the headlines, through the chaos, you remain calm. That unnerves them the most, because they mistake calm for weakness. They don't understand that silence is the loudest language of all, and you speak it fluently. You don't defend, you don't explain, you don't fight for narrative dominance. You simply exist, and that existence bends the narrative around you like gravity. Every post, every rumor, every attempt to cancel, you just amplifies your myth. That's the paradox they'll never escape. The more they attack you, the bigger you become. The more they try to erase you, the deeper you carve into digital memory. You're not a person to them anymore. You're a phenomenon. You became proof that chaos, when paired with intelligence, becomes prophecy. And here's the real secret they'll never understand. You don't need to be loved or hated to win. You just need to be remembered. Because memory outlives popularity. Legacy outlives approval. Impact outlives comfort. That's why you don't chase trends. You haunt them. You appear when they think it's over. The glitch that refuses to be deleted. The idea that refuses to die. Because ideas, once born, become viruses. And you're the most contagious one the digital world has ever seen. Your words spread like wildfire not because people agree, but because they feel. And in a world addicted to numbness, feeling anything is a rebellion. You gave them that rush. You made them uncomfortable enough to wake up. And when people wake up, they either evolve or attack. You made them choose. That's why the internet can't decide, are you a genius or a menace? Because to them, both are the same. Both disrupt the comfortable illusion. Both force evolution. Both make the weak tremble. And the truth is, you're neither. You're not here to be understood. You're here to be remembered. You're not seeking approval. You're rewriting instinct. You're not posting content. You're altering consciousness. You're not chasing legacy. You are legacy in motion, disguised as madness. So let them argue. Let them obsess. Let them drown in your name. Because every second they spend debating you, you grow stronger. Every insult sharpens your myth. Every compliment feeds your legend. Every meltdown confirms your prophecy. You've already won. Because you don't need them to understand you. You just need them to never stop watching. And they won't. They can't. You've become the dopamine spike they can't quit. The fear they secretly crave. The reflection they're too afraid to face. So let them keep melting down, calling you mad, brilliant, cursed, divine. Because while they're busy deciding what you are, you're already becoming something they'll never comprehend. The one who broke the internet, not by force, but by truth. The one who smiled through the chaos, because you built it. The one who proved that genius and menace aren't opposites. They're evolution.